Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. All the who's who of Silicon Valley were there. Millionaire investors, founders of trendy startups, actresses turned entrepreneurs, influencers with millions of followers, and even a former Secretary of State in cocktail attire. Ethan Callaway's villa, perched on the heights of Malibu, was not only a jewel of contemporary architecture, it was the symbol of its success. Glass, polished concrete, infinity pools, and plunging views of the Pacific Ocean. The golden light of dusk caressed the property's white walls, while lanterns suspended in the trees created a cozy ambience. Soft, chill music emanated from a DJ perched on a terrace, and glasses of vintage champagne were passed around. White uniformed waiters offered truffle bites, vegan caviar, and hand-carved sushi. This was more than a reception. It was a social event scrutinized, photographed, and live-streamed by the influencers in attendance. Only 34 years old Ethan Callaway embodied the new generation American dream. Starting from almost nothing, a computer security project launched in a garage in San Diego. He was now at the head of a technology empire, Callaway SEC, whose software encrypted data for governments, spy agencies, and even pharmaceutical multinationals. Discreet, elegant, always dressed to the nines in his tailored suits, he had built his reputation on two things: rigor and trust. That evening, however, he seemed different, a little lighter. His gaze often sought that of Cassandra Blake, his fiancée, a former model turned successful entrepreneur in eco-responsible luxury cosmetics. Beautiful as a Greek goddess, with a disarming laugh, Cassandra had conquered both the catwalks and the financial markets with her skincare products based on cactus from the Californian desert. On social media, they were called #Cass and Eth, the perfect couple, glamorous and inspiring, always smiling, always in love. The crowd erupted in applause as the couple descended the steps of the villa, hand in hand. She wore a sculptural red Versace gown. He wore an ivory suit, open over a black silk shirt. The highlight of the evening was approaching. They would leave the reception aboard a Mustang Shelby GT 500 to 1968, fully restored by Ethan himself, a project he had started months earlier, reflecting their relationship. Vintage, precious, powerful. The car glittered in the spotlight, parked at an angle near the stairs, a red ribbon on the hood. But as he approached the vehicle, one detail troubled Ethan. He felt a slight, almost imperceptible pressure on his left arm. He turned around, surprised, to discover a young woman who had slipped silently between two guests. She seemed out of place, almost invisible amid the designer gowns and tuxedos. A simple pale blue dress, a loose bun, a thin film of sweat on her forehead. Lucy Hart, 28 years old. She seemed nervous, tense, but her eyes, a light green, almost translucent, were clear, lucid, and worried. She whispered, almost inaudible under the music and the loud voices, "Don't get in the Mustang. Your fiancé disabled the brakes." A shiver ran down Ethan's spine. He stood there frozen, his fingers still hovering in the air, inches from the door handle. "Pardon? Asterisk, I know what I'm talking about. She came into the studio this morning. She thought no one saw her. I checked myself. Something's wrong." Ethan stared at her. He'd never seen her before. She wasn't wearing a guest badge, but there was that nervousness in her voice that couldn't be faked. Genuine fear. Desperation, even. She added, in an even lower tone, staring at Cassandra in the distance. "She doesn't want to go with you. She wants you to go alone. For good." Ethan, frozen at first, stood there, his gaze fixed on hers. The tumult of the party seemed to suddenly fade around him, as if the whole world had paused. The music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses faded away. He saw nothing but her. In her eyes, clear, tired, but piercing eyes, he read something he recognized only too rarely in his over-mediatized daily life: sincerity and a raw, almost desperate fear. Not the fear of someone who is acting, the fear of someone who knows, and knows too well. "Who are you?" he finally asked, in a low voice, as if the mere act of asking the question might burst the bubble of silence around them. The young woman swallowed and glanced furtively at the crowd. Cassandra was posing for a photo with some influential guests a few meters away, carefree, sublime, perfect. Lucy took a deep breath. My name is Lucy Hart. I'm a mechanic at Carson & Miles, the garage that restored this Mustang. She pulled a greasy business card from her dress pocket, obviously cut from an old work jumpsuit, and handed it to him. He took it automatically. I helped rebuild this car, piece by piece. It was one of our most demanding projects. But today, I saw, she paused, her eyes lowering briefly. I saw your fiancé enter the workshop alone. She rummaged through the toolbox. She thought she was alone. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. And you're sure that she... I checked under the chassis. Personally, right after he left, I climbed onto the hydraulic lift. Someone cut the brake lines cleanly with a thermal scalpel. It's invisible to the naked eye, but it would give way at the first tight turn. She looked him straight in the eyes. You wouldn't have survived a 10-minute drive. An icy current crept up Ethan's spine. The air felt heavier. He slowly took a step back, his gaze returning to the Mustang. It shone in the spotlight, sublime and deadly, like a black widow hiding beneath a leaf. Everything inside him wanted to deny it. Cassandra? No, not her. Not the one he'd proposed to after 6 months of passionate love. Not the one he'd defended to the media. Not the one who was still kissing him this morning as if the world had stopped around them. But he knew how to read people. It was what had built his empire. And in Lucy's voice, in the controlled tremor of her fingers, in the surgical precision of her words, there was no lies. Do you understand what you are telling me? She nodded slowly. And you understand what will happen to my career if I'm wrong? But I'd rather lose a job than attend a funeral. He closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again. Cold, lucid, torn. He slowly pulled his phone out of his inside pocket under Lucy's steady gaze. His fingers barely trembled. He dialed a number he knew all too well. 911. A male voice answered him. 911. What is your emergency? He took a deep breath and said calmly, I think someone tried to kill me. The officers arrived in less than 10 minutes. 2 silent patrol vehicles, without sirens, but with flashing lights, slipped among the luxury cars parked in front of the villa. The mood of the party changed instantly. Conversations ceased. Laughter died down. Everyone's gaze turned toward the entrance where the uniforms appeared, serious and methodical. Cassandra, perched on her Louboutin heels, a glass of champagne in her hand, burst into a clear, mocking laugh as she saw the police approach. Oh, another paranoid billionaire tantrum? What's gotten into you, Ethan? Do you want to do a show for TikTok? She greeted the policemen with a casual gesture, as if they were clumsy waiters. But the officers' faces remained stone-faced. They asked to see the vehicle. Ethan wordlessly guided them to the Mustang, his shoulders straight, his face set like a mask. One of the agents, a veteran named Detective Grant, briefly inspected the underside of the vehicle with his flashlight. He immediately ordered the car to be lifted onto the mobile mechanical lift Ethan had in his private garage, a luxury reserved for experienced enthusiasts. Lucy, who had remained on the sidelines, guided the technical team to the lifting system. The other guests, stunned, filmed from a distance. A few minutes later, one of the officers approached Ethan. Mr. Calloway. She was right. The pipes were deliberately cut. This is sabotage. Cassandra blanched. She dropped her glass, which shattered on the ground. Her eyes flicked from the car to the police officers, then to Ethan. What do you think this girl is? She's lying. She's jealous. She wants to get close to you. She set me up. But her mask was cracking. Her words were rushed. Her tone betrayed panic. And most importantly, she didn't yet know that the response team had already grabbed his phone upon arrival, with Ethan's agreement. The latter, as a digital security developer, had provided immediate access to real-time data recovery software. One of the officers signaled to his superior. He approached Ethan and whispered quietly. We found a series of deleted messages, sent to a number registered in Belize. She talks about a life insurance policy in your name, declared in case of accident. Forged. Amount, $10 million. There's also a receipt for a wire transfer to an offshore account, and a plane ticket to Cancun tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Ethan felt his heart clench in his chest. It was all there. Icy, calculated, surgical. It wasn't an impulse that it was a plan. A murder in disguise. An oppressive silence fell as one of the police officers approached Cassandra. Cassandra Blake, you are under arrest for attempted voluntary manslaughter and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. She tried to back away. No, You have no proof. It's not what you think. Ethan, tell them. Tell them you love me. But the handcuffs clicked, and the cameras rolled. The journalists, many of whom had been invited to the party to celebrate the most glamorous union of tech and influence, rushed toward the stage. Cameras popped. Some shouted his name. Others were already aiming their microphones at Ethan, hoping for a reaction. He remained motionless, frozen, broken, disgusted. He doesn't say anything. During this time, Lucy, standing back, watched the scene without satisfaction or revenge. She hadn't moved since the police arrived. No smile, no triumph. She knew the cost of telling the truth when everyone else wanted to believe the lie. She knew the cost of standing up in a world where money and image often trumped justice. But she had no regrets. She gave Ethan one last look. He didn't see her. Too absorbed, too shaken. It didn't matter. She didn't want neither recognition nor glory. She hadn't come to be applauded. She just wanted that he lives. Then, without a sound, Lucy turned, hugged her jacket, and disappeared into the crowd, like an honest shadow in a sea of golden masks. 2 days later, while the media uproar surrounding the Cassandra Blake affair filled screens, networks, and television channels, Ethan Callaway was driving unescorted, without a driver, in a discreet SUV with slightly tinted windows. He had left his bodyguards at the gate. He wasn't wearing a suit, nor an expensive watch. Just raw jeans, a light jacket, and that absent expression you wear when you're confronting a truth you'd rather ignore. He stopped in front of a small, faded garage at the end of an industrial alley in Pasadena. A dented sign hung above it, Carson and Miles. Auto repair since 1974. Smoke was coming out of the shed, mingled with the smell of oil, hot metal, and reheated coffee. Inside, Lucy Hart, in overalls covered in black spots, stood under an old pickup Ford F-150. She worked with concentration, a headlamp on her forehead and a wrench in her hands. Her movements were precise, rhythmic, anchored in a millimeter-perfect routine. Ethan looked at her for a moment without saying anything. She seemed peaceful in this world of engines and harsh silence. A woman no one noticed in a world that valued storefronts over foundations. And yet, she was the one who had saved his life. He cleared his throat. "Hello, Lucy." She jumped slightly, rolling the board she was lying on to sit up. Her hair was tied back in a quick braid, her face covered in small patches of grease. When she saw Ethan, her brows furrowed, confused but not aggressive. "What are you doing here?" she asked, getting up, wiping her hands on an old rag. He handed her a small brown paper bag. "Donuts and decent coffee. Yours looked undrinkable the other night." A corner of her lips lifted, but she didn't take the bag. She looked straight into his eyes. "Have you come to thank me?" "No." "Well, yes, of course. But not only that. I wanted to understand why. Why risk all that for a stranger?" Lucy was silent for a moment, looking at the black marks on her fingers, the old pickup truck, the shadow of the past in her eyes. Then she spoke. "Because no one had ever done it for my brother." Ethan raised his eyebrows slightly. She continued, her voice a little deeper. "Noah, my older brother. He died 2 years ago. He was driving a cheap car. The brakes failed on a downhill slope. They said he was speeding, that he was being smart. But I knew Noah. He drove carefully. He had just landed a job as a mechanic at an agricultural center. He was careful." She turned away briefly, her eyes wet but her voice firm. "I later found out that the car's previous owner had tinkered with the brakes to collect an insurance premium. But he was never prosecuted. Lack of evidence. I tried everything. I contacted lawyers, the police. No one listened to me." Ethan listened to him, arms crossed, his heart heavy. "So I made a promise. A stupid promise, maybe, that if one day I saw the signs I missed for my brother, I wouldn't hesitate, even if no one believed me, even if it cost me my job, even if people called me crazy." She turned her eyes back to him. "So when I saw Cassandra, alone in the workshop, leaning under the Mustang, her hands where they should never have been, I knew. My instincts screamed at me." She shrugged. "I acted. This time I spoke. And you're alive. That's all that matters." A heavy silence, full of truth, fell between them. Ethan, usually so comfortable with speeches, fundraisers, words that reassure the crowd, no longer knew what to say. He looked at her like a forgotten column that had supported a roof without ever complaining. "You are the bravest person I have ever met," he finally said. She shook her head with a sad smile. I'm not brave. I'm just tired of seeing the world turn its head when it should be standing up. Ethan, his eyes lowered, nodded slowly. So let me offer you something. Not as a thank you, but as a start. I'd like to hire you to work on a personal project, a foundation, to investigate, repair, protect, so that no other Noah disappears into indifference. Lucy froze, surprised. Are you serious? More than ever. She didn't answer right away, but deep inside her, something opened. A possibility. A light. The days stretched like an endless night for Ethan Calloway. The case Blake had set headlines ablaze around the world. Ethan's and Cassandra's names were plastered across newspapers, news websites, and 24-hour news channels. But this time, it wasn't a celebration of a union, but a tale of betrayal, of a cold, calculated plot. The looks, once admiring, sometimes turned heavy and suspicious. The once invincible billionaire appeared vulnerable, wounded, humiliated. Faced with this media tsunami, Ethan made a radical decision. He suspended all his public appearances. No more interviews, no more conferences, no more photos on social media. He needed silence, a moment of perspective. He needed to find himself, to relearn how to breathe away from the spotlight. But he wasn't alone. Lucy was there, like an anchor in the storm. He came back to see her often, unannounced. Sometimes just to share a black coffee in the dusty garage, sometimes to dig his hands into the grease beside her, or simply to listen. They talked about everything, of engines and their mysterious mechanics, where each part has its vital role. Grief, this wound that everyone carries differently, but which leaves a lasting mark. Trust, fragile like glass, which must be rebuilt every day. Hope, sometimes, despite everything. Lucy loved to tease Ethan. You know, you're the billionaire who could have ended up in a ravine without even realizing it. He smiled then, amused. And you are the whisper that changed my life, the one that kept me from becoming a statistic. The months passed. Little by little, their relationship took root, made of a sincere, unadorned complicity. A year later, they jointly inaugurated a foundation called Breakpoint. This carefully chosen name signified both the breaking point, the limit, but also the desire to curb invisible dangers. The foundation was dedicated to independent mechanical expertise, to the prevention of automotive sabotage, a little-known but very real subject, which had almost cost Ethan his life, and so many others. On the day of the inauguration, under a clear sky, surrounded by mechanics, journalists looking for a new breath of hope, and loyal friends, Lucy and Ethan gave a heartfelt speech. They weren't a couple yet. Maybe one day. For now, they were driving side by side, slowly, cautiously. They knew the road would be long. But one thing was certain. This time the brakes worked perfectly.